people are used to hearing me say, I'm not sure if we're on yet, because that's the
Right.
nature of the technology. Okay, we appear to be on. Yes. Yes. Okay.
Perfect.
So we're joined this hour with Nia Mcallister, who is going to read us a poem right now, and then we're going to get into a rich conversation.
All right. This is entitled Consort of the Spirits, after Ntozake Shange. There are road maps in my great grandmother's braids. She keeps seeds in there too, because where we are going, home must come with us. Tell me how your mother hides spices in the hem of her skirt, tucks hymns behind her ears, and calls it packing for tomorrow. Do the women in your family hide rosewater in their saliva, sage in between their thighs? Because how dare we sleep on strange land without blessing? Tell me how your sister folds indigo leaves between her toes, smuggles cotton flowers under her arms, and promises that where we are going, there will be color. There are black-eyed peas in my auntie's coin purse. She keeps moonlight in there too, because luck is far more precious than loose change. I carry a cowrie shell in the crook of my arm. It sings when my twins are near. I wear strands of sea glass upon my ears because where we are going, there will be music. Do the women in your family wrap beeswax around their ring fingers, keep matchsticks in their collarbones, and promise that we will never know darkness? They call this survival, but we pack what we must because what we return to may no longer be ours. They call this survival, but the body is a compass and we are each other's destination. They call this survival, but this ritual of making to leave before knowing where we're headed is how we birth futures. They call this survival, but we know better. Where there is a woman, there's magic.
Wow, that's incredible. Thank you so much for joining us. Can you tell us? I mean, that was a beautiful poem and all rounds of applause, all rounds of forms. Can you tell us a little bit about the Museum of the African Diaspora up in the Bay?
Yeah, so Museum of the African Diaspora, MOAD, is based in San Francisco. It's a contemporary art museum that features specifically Black artists from around the world. So I think it's a unique cultural institution, especially in the landscape of San Francisco, that we are specifically a platform for living Black artists. And I think that's very essential. And so I've worked there over the last almost 2.5 years now, managing the visitor experience department, so doing a lot of the public facing work. And I have the exciting role of also running the bookstore there, so curating one of the only Black bookstores in San Francisco, specifically with literature of the diaspora. And I think it's been exciting to really bring my personal passions and work as a writer, as a poet, to that space, and I feel like I can be myself in that space, which is exciting. That we're not only a platform for Black artists, but like inside the institution itself, we are a space that cultivates that as well. And so it's been really exciting to then bring like poetry to that space. And having started the open mic series 2 years ago, that's really grown, and it's a project that I'm super proud of that initiated in that space.
What is the name of the open mic series?
So it's the third Thursday MOAD open mic. We usually host it once a month, every third Thursday, which is in conjunction with free evenings, where we extend our hours, work with the public and a lot of the other museums in the art center area do so as well. And so that often gets a lot of foot traffic in the neighborhood. People are kind of popping between different spaces, but it's really gained momentum. And so parts of our audience are often folks who just happen to be coming to the museum for free, but at the same time, there's been a very dedicated audience of folks who come specifically from the open mic and are like, oh, we as well. And so that's been exciting to see that it's gained such a following. And we've been a nice place to show it's here in the Bay Area.
Yeah, no, that's incredible. I mean, that's an incredible thing that you've been able to open up that space in that way. So, what are some of the other work you do? Not necessarily poetry related, but like some of the other art related activities there that you are kind of, the go to person for.
Let's see. Well, I mean, my passions have always laid in the arts generally. Like I grew up being a dancer, so like that's just like a personal part of how I express myself. I think I've expanded some of my work beyond just poetry specifically. I'm fortunate to be part of a group called Earth in Color, and we're actually working on an environmental zine called Radical. I've been able to kind of apply my skills both writing pieces for this publication while also doing some editing work too. So that's been a project that's in the works at the moment. We're expecting to release our first edition after this kind of current phase of what we're living through hopefully wraps up in the fall. But that's been exciting to then combine, have a background in environmental justice, so tying that in and being able to expand beyond just poetry and getting to kind of try my hand at other forms of writing too.
Yeah. So as I understand it, you actually studied environmental justice in your higher education, and so how is that environmental justice background kind of melded with your your poetic journey?
Right. Yeah, so like environmental justice was the short version of the title of my major. It was broadly race, class, gender, and the environment. So a huge net of content. And I think that's shaped and defined a lot of my worldview and how I, work and live at the intersections of all of these different facets of social, racial, and environmental justice. And so I think that lens comes into play oftentimes in the writing and the content that I choose to focus on. Like whether it's explicit or not, a lot of my poetry pulls from elements of nature and environment and is always interwoven with like family and legacy and ancestry. Because I think the critical part of environmental justice is this intersection of people and this quote unquote natural environment. I think when folks think of like environmental studies, they're often only thinking of nature as something that's devoid of people, and not contextualizing that within the fact of like history and legacy, and that people have always been part of the environment, and oftentimes communities of color are the ones who are like facing the brunt of a lot of these environmental injustices, and that plays out in our day-to-day life. And so I think all of those elements come into play when writing, whether not often like not every piece is going to be explicitly like calling out the issues, but I think there's always those underlying tones because that's the framework that I'm approaching my writing from.
What are some of the issues with environmental racism in the Bay Area that those who may not live in the Bay Area might be unfamiliar with, that you think that they should that some attention should be drawn to?
Right. I mean, like there's so many factors that are coming into play, and like we can talk just even in this context of right now. I mean, more broadly, we think about the way that cities are mapped and organized, and that oftentimes the lower income communities of color, often Black communities, are situated on land that doesn't have the value, and therefore is then situated close to toxic facilities, close to waste. The issue of food deserts not being closely located to fresh food, grocery stores, only having access to maybe corner stores or liquor stores, and not being able to then sustain ourselves with healthy food and resources we need. And so the thing about I live here in Oakland, in West Oakland, but this is an issue that's like defines the geography of a lot of the Bay. And so like, I mean, I can almost see like what area is. So we have all of these other issues of like the fumes, the like toxic debris that is in the landscape of these neighborhoods. I know some issues of environmental racism came up just in the context of like the cruise ship that was here that was then docked in Oakland versus San Francisco. And a lot of folks were saying, well, like we know that Oakland becomes this dumping ground for things that San Francisco doesn't want because of access, that privilege of being able to say, oh, not here in our yard, but we take it over there because that's not our issue. So I think a lot of folks were rightly frustrated and angry by this decision. That it's this land here by the port in West Oakland that the risk factors aren't taken into consideration because the people in these communities aren't valued in the same way.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's very true. I mean, Jesus. I mean, we have very similar situations in Los Angeles, as you can imagine. I mean,
right. Okay. Exactly.
So how about we hear another poem?
Sure.
Yeah.
All right. This one's entitled "Walk While Walking" by Nia Wilson. The road's so dark, you can barely see him. Hands up in surrender. Silhouette hugged tight to the concrete. You can't separate skin from sidewalk. It's ironic though because dead men don't walk. Which begs the question, who gets to walk alone at night? We already know black hands are a crime of possession, but possession becomes prize, becomes prey when they see hips before hands. These curves too fine to be called a four-way stop. We all know no stop ain't in their vocabulary. Nobody comes running to save black girls. We just left to carry the world's problems and pick up our own selves after. I'm fine on my own, but maybe I don't want to be so alone. So my hands stay wrapped around the sharp edge of my keys because what's the value in locked doors when there's nobody home to open them? Home is but a feeling, and somebody's home away from home is now a chalk outline on the corner of liberty and justice, because this is America, land of the free.
And also very powerful. Now, this poem is also attached to a larger project that you're part of with a number of other artists called Make It Home Safe.
Yes. Yeah, so it's a project that has been organized by a woman named Anisha, who I was lucky to connect with at an open mic here in Oakland called Second Mondays, which is an excellent space that folks should check out. And so we connected there because I actually read the piece that I just shared. And she told me about this photo project that she's doing that's in memory and legacy of Nia Wilson, who was murdered on BART now a couple of years ago. And so she really connected with the content of the piece that I shared and asked if I would like to participate. And so her project is basically framing Black women within the context of the BART system within this landscape of the Bay Area. And so she's doing this photo series of different women at every single BART stop. And then following up with interviews and questions, essentially talking about issues of safety and what it is to navigate this world that we live in as a Black woman. And then also countering that with finding ways to express ourselves and find self-care and joy despite living in the conditions that we do. And so I was documented at West Oakland, which is the BART stop closest to me. And Anisha and I had a really good exchange where I expressed both like the issues that a lot of folks are talking about of just like literally having to worry about safety every time you step outside, and that your identity and your body carries so much, and there is danger associated with that, whether we try and avoid those situations or not. And so we discussed that, and then also bringing up how for me poetry and writing is a way to then find in a way that safe haven, to find a way to both critically address these issues in a very real way, but also find that way, that sense of joy in being able to express myself that way. And so I was really excited that not only to be a part of this project, but that she wanted to take the project a step further. And she actually created a video where she solicited all the different participants, like short videos of us in moments where we felt joy and expressed joy, and compiled those together. And so, for example, I sent in videos of hosting open mic at the museum, as well as videos of dancing, because that's one of my other um, forms of self-expression and something I'm extremely passionate about. And so she compiled those all together, and then the actual audio of the video itself was a recording of me reading that piece, Black Woman Walking. So it was a really important juxtaposition of both the language and the heaviness that I talk about in the piece itself, and about Nia Wilson, and then also these beautiful depictions of Black joy and us still thriving and living in these bodies that we do.
Yeah, that sounds like quite the project. Um, so in this time, so we talked a little beforehand. In this time, we see, how is, this quarantine, how is it affecting, this project, Make It Home Safe? How is it affecting your work at MOAD? What are some of the things that you're kind of experiencing in this moment?
Right. I mean, I think it's been
Project.
interesting. So for context, the museum itself has been closed to the public since the shelter-in-place measures have been taken here in the Bay Area. So pretty early on. So of course, that's kind of shifted some of the work that we're doing. Just now, not like working from home and not physically being in this space. And especially me, I work in a department that interacts directly with the public. So that's very different for me, um, doing more of the kind of like logistical work behind the scenes, and that's been the focus of my efforts. But I think broadly, in what we're seeing across different arts institutions is that this period of time has been extremely rough, for these organizations, and we've seen layoffs and cuts across the country at very like prominent museums and institutions that have endowments but are still having to make these decisions because in this current time museums and cultural centers aren't deemed essential, which is an interesting kind of issue to dig into because while a lot of us are lucky enough to be working at home, people are turning to art specifically to find that sense of comfort, to find distraction, whatever it may be. So people are like, watching films, TV shows, reading books, listen to music. We find, I mean, especially on social media, like I've been going to so many different digital art panels and talks, and poets are out here. We're organizing every week. We're coming together and making spaces, which is hugely important. And yet, that's not where the money is going right now. Those are not the spaces that are being supported. The arts and cultural. I mean, I guess from a government standpoint, is not deemed essential. And so it's interesting in this time of figuring out, well, what does the future of these institutions look like if we as people find the products of these institutions important? How are we going to sustain that if museums aren't able to make it through this period of time? So that's definitely what we're grappling with, and I know a lot of other institutions are as well. And something I don't have the answer for necessarily of what support looks like. Of course, like we need folks to like pull through, give as they can. But I think it's a larger question though about the position of these types of organizations and institutions structurally within society.
Yeah, I mean, it's very interesting, the idea that, I mean, obviously, if you break your arm, you don't want someone come like sing a folk song or something. But like the fact of the matter is that people, like you go to like a teenager's room, there's posters of their favorite, bands, or there's musicians, or you go meet someone at, go see a movie. People write poetry to each other for one or another reason. And the idea that art isn't essential, or art isn't like this component of human life that is just everywhere, and it's absurd. It's absurd.
Right.
So we actually have a question here. It says, this comes from Jose Luis. He says, Nia, can you talk a little bit about the juxtaposition of dance and poetry in your work? Por favor.
Thank you, Josiah, for the question. That's a good question. For me, actually, dance came before poetry. I've been dancing since I was probably 4 or 5. So I was very rigorously in classes every week. That was my life. Um, and actually, something I thought I was going to pursue in college. I thought I was going to double major and be a dance major, and that was a very serious consideration. But it was actually upon injuring my knee in my second to last year when I kind of had to put that passion on hold in a sense. And it was actually at that turning point when I turned to writing more seriously. I think I've always been writing in a sense for myself, but writing wasn't something that I often shared with other people. It was a very private, personal self-reflection type of thing. And it was in that period where I turned to writing to kind of like process and use that as a sense of self-expression when dance previously was the primary form. And so in shifting towards writing, I think I've always continued to have to carry over elements of dance. Like there's still a map out a dance piece. Like there is choreography on the page in the same way that the body does that on a dance floor. I think it's been exciting to find ways to creatively combine those. I still have this dream of writing a piece and then either like recording it or dancing to a poem. That's something that's in my mind that I'm still trying to figure out how that's going to play out. But it's something I want to make happen because I think it would be an exciting way to combine those two passions. And I know it's definitely something that's doable. So in the works. So
That's exciting.
maybe this is the time to do it.
Yeah, yeah. So would you consider yourself a multimedia artist?
In a sense, I don't think I've ever used that word necessarily to describe my work. I guess when I think of multimedia, I mean, dance does count. I don't know. I would multi-talented sounds weird also, but a level to the multi-hyphenate type of thing.
Yeah, yeah. The multi slash slash
Yeah.
slash slash.
I do a lot of things. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think in reading to prepare for this, or may I have heard you say this because when we did that show together, you're kind of like a naturally kind of like a bit of an introvert, and it took you a while to get into the world of poetry and really jump in. So what advice would you have to those who people who are sitting on notebooks and notebooks and notebooks of poems but don't really feel comfortable in getting out there just yet?
Right. I mean, I think sometimes it just takes sharing with one person to kind of break the ice in a sense. I think that's what took me first getting into writing more seriously, is that a close friend of mine actually asked before I had shared anything, before I'd even brought up the subject of writing, had asked, "Oh, do you write?" And it was kind of a question out of the blue. And I ended up saying, I was like, yeah, actually, like I have this whole document of writing that I've been like journaling for years that I've never showed anyone. And so this friend was like, I mean, if you're comfortable, can I see this writing? So I shared it, which was one of the most vulnerable things that I've ever done. It was terrifying at the moment, but really affirming when my friend came back and was like, wow, I feel like I understand you even better now, having read this. Like, you have a strength here, and it's valuable for you to share that. And of course, that didn't then transform me into like being up on the mic and sharing my writing intensely from there. But I would say that that was a turning point in that it both affirmed something that I probably already knew about myself, is that I am a strong writer, but that it is also valuable because other folks are going through some of the things that we articulate in our writing. But oftentimes, I mean, for many writers, we write to express or to pin down something that's very specific to our own experience. But oftentimes, other people find connection in that. So I'd say for folks who are kind of looking for that way to then, put their work or themselves out there, I think it does start on a smaller scale, and it definitely doesn't happen overnight. I mean, it still took me at least another year after that to actually go up and do an open mic. And then from there, like continuing to challenge myself and be in spaces, even if I was like, did not feel prepared, did not feel as confident as I could have been in wanting to share. I think it's still that practice of putting yourself in those spaces, because feedback is always important, and also challenge yourself. You're not going to become a better writer, even if just for yourself, if you don't experience that. Also, another thing I find, like, even though now I'm becoming more comfortable, like being in space and hosting and public speaking, but even just reading aloud to yourself is a very good first start, because oftentimes words just live on the page and they have a whole nother life of themselves once you actually speak them out loud.
Mm-hmm.
So even if folks aren't ready to take that step of just sharing it kind of out of the blue with someone, I think like vocalizing anything that you've written is an essential step of the process. And it's something I'm finding now too, as I'm working with others, like editing, revising things, doing collaborative writing pieces with people. It's a whole nother experience actually speaking something out loud. And I think it's essential if you're going to become a better writer.
Yeah, yeah. And I think it's also important to like kind of delve into the community of writers where where you are local. I mean, you and I met at a reading put together by Tongoese and Martin, and I think Josiah was also one of the readers that night.
Yeah, we have a good crew.
As well as Isabel.
Isabel Miller. Yeah.
Yeah. It was an incredible night. It was incredible night of poetry. It was really
yeah.
Everyone.
Every time at those events, I just leave more and more inspired, because each of us has our own unique style, but it's fun to kind of play off of each other's energy, and then kind of like it's always inspiring.
Yeah. So for those people watching right now who aren't maybe in the Bay Area, or maybe they are in the Bay Area but they're not necessarily connected to the scene there, can you speak a little bit to like just how vital so much of the Bay Area is right now?
Right. I mean, I think we have a really, really talented community here of poets and writers. I mean, I say community broadly, but I mean, there's always all these different pockets of the poetry community, and it's so active. I mean, I live here in the East Bay, and there's always different events to go to. But then working in San Francisco, get those affirmations or like the reactions from a crowd, that right now it's different. But the thing is, I think this community is still extremely active in this time. Like, it's been incredible to see how creative folks have been getting. Like, I participate in a lot of different open mics, both here in Oakland. Like, Josiah runs an open mic that happens every third Thursday, which is really great. I mean, I host the one at Moad every third Thursday as well, so we're almost always double booking. The second Monday's open mic that happens at Red Bay Coffee. Those are all spaces that I really value and have been able to make such essential connections with new poets, with old like poets that I've already known, and being able to bridge that has been really cool. And so it's been exciting to then see those same spaces transform and adapt to now kind of this digital moment that we're having. It's also Nomadic Press here in Oakland has been organizing, and I mean has been a huge platform for just a lot of Bay Area artists. So definitely shout out to them for both publishing their work and then also organizing open mic spaces. So I know they've been doing ones every Friday night. So I think the community is still very, very vibrant and active in this period, which is, keeping my spirits up as well.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. Yeah, no, the Nomadic Press. I mean, I've been going up to the Bay more often over the last few months, and I've when you don't live in a city, you don't know everything, right? So, I was I'm really amazed by the number of events and things and all the different directions they're tied to and pulling things towards. And
yeah, it's an extremely creative space, and I mean, like, I've been fortunate to connect with them both, like as a participant in open mics and supporting Josiah's event. Tonga also put me on to this collaboration that they have, which is between Nomadic Coffee and Nomadic Press, where they are actually distributing different poets' pieces through bags of coffee beans, which is a super creative idea, which I love. So I got to be part of that series in the fall of last year. So my poetry is out there. And
Yeah.
but it was cool because you would get the bag of coffee beans, and then there would be a physical piece of paper with an illustrated portrait of the poet, their poem, and then also a number, because all of the poets recorded their pieces, and you could call the number and hear us then reading it. So there are all these different elements and like sensory ways to experience poetry and coffee at the same time, which was incredible. So
That is incredible. That is incredible. Wow. Wow. Do you know where your coffee came from?
I don't, because it was in all these different bags. So each bag
Right,
was a blend.
yeah.
Yeah, all roasted here, like in the Bay. But yeah.
Yeah. Wow, okay. I mean, I'm just, like,
Yeah.
I
But
mean, that,
it's a whole mystery because I didn't even know which bags they ended up in. Like they had a date range and saying, "Oh, I think your bags went out this week." But it's that's part of the fun of it. It's reaching people almost in an anonymous way.
yeah.
I don't know all the people who got to experience it through that, but it's exciting to know it's out there.
Yeah. No, you released it to the world. I mean, that's really, I mean, what more can you ask for?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's phenomenal. That's phenomenal. So what's can we hear another poem?
Sure.
I want you to dance to the poem, but you don't have to do that. Don't worry about him.
What's that?
I think Josiah is saying, like, can we hear a dance poem or see a dance poem? But I don't even know what he's talking about.
Do I have a dance poem, Josiah? Now I'm like, what? Let me think on that for 1 second. I don't know.
Oh, we got Avachka.
Oh yeah, Avacha.
Yeah, he's talking about. Oh, people are promoting. The Bay Area people are promoting their events. That's cool.
Good.
Oh, Josiah's clarifying. He did not say that. He did not call for a dance poem. Okay.
Okay. Well, since
I take the fault. Really cool.
Well, I'll read a poem.
Okay.
Josiah's favorites.
Okay.
This is entitled Laundry List. 1. Some eggs hold differently when the body reaches its quarter mark. 2. How you slide up under my rib cage with unforgiving ease. 3. My fingernails under your skin leave what kind of offering? 4. Silence is different in the mind of a thinker. 5. A poem becoming. 6. My fingers type on the offbeat. 7. Audre Lorde on the uses of the erotic. 8. Do not question if I know how to multitask. 9. Have you come today? 10. A poet confined to the lines on an unruled page is just a poet. 11. Alice Coltrane. 12. Use my arm as your base. 13. When do you stop packing for tomorrow? 14. Optimism wears millennial pink to her funeral. 15. Brazilian rap plays in the background. 16. Eyes, neck, kneecap. 17. Run. 18. Who will protect you if you do not? 19. The poet tells time. 20. Age is a number by definition. 21. We'll have 3 kids. 22. 3 is my favorite number. 23. One day my favorite year left me. 24. I am not ready for 25. Every time I enter a church, I expect to feel something. 26. Slow down, baby. We're not there yet. 27. Turn around. We left the quarters at home.
Wow. That's a great work. So I want to ask you some artistic questions then. Like, how do you go about your writing process? Do you have a simple. Keep it simple. How do you go about your writing process?
Honestly, writing usually comes to me when it's least convenient. Oftentimes I'll be doing something else or like walking down the street and the line will come to me. And so I'm like probably a lot of people, and I use the notes on my phone to just capture those lines in the moment. Mm-hmm. So I have like thousands of beginnings of poems on my phone notes. And so usually that will spark the interest of an idea for a poem, and I'll keep it there. Um, and it's usually not in that exact moment when the poem becomes itself or when I actually sit down to write it. I usually have to be in a certain kind of frame of mind to really get. If I don't think I can tell a poem, okay, I'm going to write you right now. That doesn't work for me. Though I know the importance of actually sitting down and getting a lot of content on the page, so I try to do that if I can, just like free writing, because I think that's an important practice to maintain. But once I do kind of get into a rhythm of a piece, then it builds on itself, and then I'll often have to go back and do the revising, the editing, and even though I enjoy writing pieces like by hand, like pen and paper, I find myself writing on my computer a lot just because I really enjoy kind of playing around with the organization of lines and like flipping around, like, okay, if this doesn't quite fit right here, then how can I then manipulate it to make it work in this other area? So for example, the piece that I just read, it's funny, after I finished reading, I realized that actually wasn't the most updated version of the poem. Like I have it in my document, and I realized that after I read it last week somewhere, I actually changed around the order of the lines because reading it, I heard certain lines. I was like, no, I think that's better fitting to this spot over here. So it's funny because I was partway through the poem and I was like, oh, this isn't how I remembered it being. So I think it's hard for me because poems also never feel done. That's part of the writing process, that sometimes a poem will be in a certain form for a certain time and it works. It's fine. But then a new life to it will appear. So some folks who know my writing will hear certain lines again in pieces and be like, hey, that sounds familiar. And oftentimes it's either that it's a fragment, like something that was just living in my notes that I then decided to incorporate into a piece. Or there was a line that was living in a poem, but I then kind of disintegrated the poem and turned it into something else. So it's always kind of a living process, I'd say. Like even one of my first pieces that I felt extremely proud of that I then shared and put out in the world, the opening lines of it I wrote in 2014, 2013 or 2014. And the poem itself didn't become the state that it lives in now until 2017. Like I didn't even write the rest of the content. I didn't know the poem was going to become until 3 years later. So it's kind of exciting in that way that it always keeps it new in a sense. But yeah, usually poems just come to me.
Yeah. So in that editing process, what tells you, oh no, this is near the end, it really belongs in the middle, or oh no, this is the beginning, I need to move that to the middle, or oh no, this poem should begin a different way. That's not a good way to enter in. So how do you make those? What's the basis of your?
Yeah, I think this goes back in some ways to what we talked about earlier of just the importance of reading out loud. I think that's always a part of what plays into when I'm writing. Like I'll get a lot of content on the page. I'll kind of feel out how I think the order and cadence of it is, and then I'll read it out loud to myself. And oftentimes it's in reading, I'll either like trip over words or I'll be like, this doesn't quite sound right, or it just kind of leaves me with an empty feeling. I'm like this, it's not doing what it's supposed to. So in that case, kind of in a read through, I would flag lines that I know kind of aren't matching the context they're in. And sometimes in that moment, I'll just stop. I'll like have read midway through a piece and be like, okay, I need to just figure out where this line goes. So I'm very stubborn in that way. I'm like, I need to figure out how this can best fit into the piece. But then it takes that, like repeating that process many, many times. It's definitely just not a one read through type of thing. And sometimes it's just, I know my writing well enough now that I know when I'm not pushing myself, or I know that I made a line too easy, that there's more work to do. So I think that's an important part of the editing process, is knowing what more you can do, even if you don't have the right words yet, of just knowing like this can be more, or moving something to a different area is a temporary fix, but it actually more has to do with what the lines are saying themselves.
Yeah, that makes sense. Oftentimes, I feel like, for me, I come up with the stuff, and I know something's wrong. And usually, when it's wrong, it's usually for me that was a pretty simple fix. Like, oh, this is anticlimactic because this appears too early. It's
Right.
too, like, it needs to be more towards the end because there's more power in this. It needs to build up to this as opposed to having it here. And then, like, why is this guy still talking? Like
Right. What does your editing process look like?
For me, it's pretty tightly structured. I have this kind of thing I created, like a 3-act poem, and it's like a writing model. It has like 3 circles on each side, and they're connected and circles on top. And one says topic, details, point. This says Act 1, Act 2, Act 3. So for me, I need to take you on I need to present you information in a way that is a little bit different and interesting, and kind of like catches you off guard at times, and other times gives you information that you're very well aware of, and you feel that the dramatic process of it. And
Uh-huh.
then the other thing I have to do is I have to take you on a journey of tone, right? So in the beginning, if it's sad, if I want to make you sad, right, I would go like sad, hope, sad, because you're only sad because it was a moment of hope. I mean, that's what makes it more devastating.
Right.
If I'm going to make it triumphant, it's going to be like, okay, excited, proud, middle, struggle, and we overcame the struggle because that was threatening our happiness, right?
Yeah.
So whatever it is, like, I have to take you on a kind of a tone journey combined with introducing information that's kind of different or unique. That's kind of, if I feel if I can do those 2 things, then it's done. I can
Okay.
move on to the next one. So
That's valuable. It's always interesting hearing from other poets and writers just like their processes and what works. So I think everyone's gonna have to have like a unique kind of like procedure that works for their writing that's very specific to what it's like. But there's still definitely elements that carry over that we all should be incorporating.
yeah. Well, I mean, it was kind of for me listening to you. I mean, thinking about, this isn't about me, this is about you. So, but thinking about what you were saying about how I need to move lines around. That, I mean, to that immediately spoke to me, because I know that I have something down, it's really good, but there's something wrong. And the thing that's almost always wrong is that the lines are in the wrong order. That's almost like 99% of the time. That's what's wrong. The lines are in the wrong order, and I just don't know which ones are. I don't know which ones. It's like a mystery.
But you can just tell that something's not quite sitting right.
Yeah, yeah. And it's almost always just that the lines are in the wrong order. For me, anyways. I don't know. So that's when you said that really spoke to me.
Right.
And,
Yeah, sometimes it's not as obvious as you'd think it would be. You can just tell that something's off, but you still gotta like sit with it a little bit more.
But I would, every single time I have to rediscover that's what's wrong. Like it's always like this existential mystery that expands into like, oh my god, do I not know what I'm doing? Have I just this has all been like dumb luck? And like it extends into this crisis. And then no, it's just like, just move that down here. Like
Right. But that's the best feeling though, when you actually like move a line to the right spot it's been in. Like I get so excited, then I just keep rereading that part. So I'm like, okay, finally it feels right.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, so we've covered a lot of ground here. So what should people know about you and your art, and like what should, like, how can they connect to a lot of what you're doing?
So I would encourage folks to join in on the open mics that I'm hosting. So I'm actually hosting the next Moad open mic virtually this Thursday, the 23rd, from 6 to 8. So it's going to be on Zoom. If you go to Museum of the African Diaspora, either our Facebook page or our website, on our calendar, you'll see the listing and all the info for joining that. Javier Reyes is going to be our feature this week, which is exciting. He's been coming through to our open mics in person before, which has been great. So that's really exciting, being able to continue that now virtually. It's definitely been a learning process for me, just trying to kind of transform the community building and try to, in a sense, recreate that space that we have physically in a virtual realm, I guess. So I'm continuing that work. That's now twice a month, so every 2 weeks. The following open mics are going to be May 7th and May 21st. Let's see. So the thing is, am in the process. I'm compiling a manuscript. In the future, I will be able to promote a book. That's the goal. I also want to work on kind of making a either landing page or some sort of way to kind of put all my pieces and all my work together in more so of a portfolio. I'm active on social media in terms of like Instagram. That's usually where I promote a lot of my events. So my Instagram is Nia Pearl. I have an archived poetry Instagram when all my poems are really short, but that's not as effective these days. So it's more just kind of like archives. So those are the first place that people can kind of connect to find out more. But show up, support our open mics as we continue like building this community. I think that's important these days.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, I think that there's something that you said about the internet and what we can do with it that is, we were always able to do this, but right now everyone's kind of they're kind of looking for content, they're looking to connect in ways that they wouldn't. And there's certain things that are actually, you lose something, you gain something. And I think that we're gaining is that we're connecting with people that we might not otherwise connect with. And I can prove it because right here we have Juan Espinosa saying, "Cool insight, enjoy the poem and post discussion on it. I appreciate that rework. I appreciate that too. Rework the lines and reanalyze it if they hold the same meaning as intended. Solid." Now, Juan is a writer, poet out here in Los Angeles who organizes in, I believe, the San Gabriel Valley One Mic Collective, and so able to connect Bay Area poetry from someone who's a representative of the MOAD to One Mic Collective, and that would not have happened otherwise. So.
See, that's what I've been finding a lot of joy in, like kind of getting over the learning process of this all, is that it is so incredible to be in these spaces, these virtual spaces with like folks like you or people who aren't physically in the Bay Area. And I think even that was a testament in our first Moab open mic that I hosted, the first virtual one. We had over 80 people who were like literally from across the country. We had someone calling in who read from the UK, who was incredible. We've been really expanding the reach of it. And a lot of folks, there are people like poets that I love and value who have moved outside of the Bay, I used to be seeing them at open mics here, but now are on the East Coast or New York or wherever. But they're showing up, they're reading. And so in a way, it kind of feels like we're all coming back home in a sense, that we all get to share in these spaces together. And even folks here in the Bay Area who can't like physically make it to the museum for a various amount of reasons, are still able to participate and be active. And so I think even when kind of all of these restrictions are lifted, we're not going to go back to how we were before and just broadly. But I think for open mics and kind of community events like this, I know specifically for the museum, I would like to try to continue ways to still have virtual open mics, even if it supplements like still having a physical open mic in person, but also doing one digitally, because I think there's value and there's momentum in the community that we're building in this way, that I don't want to lose that. And I don't also want to cut off that access from folks who are then now fairly active and engaged with our platform. And like, so I'm definitely thinking that that's an important thing to sustain beyond this.
Is there a way for people to materially, that are listening here, to materially support the MOAD in this time of crisis?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would recommend if you go to our website, which is moadsf.org, you can make a donation through our website. We also use a platform called Give by Cell. So if you text MOADSF to the number 56512, you can just send a donation right through there. And so honestly, like any amount that people can contribute is always welcome. So like that's one financial way to support. Also showing up to our other programs and events. So open mic is not the only thing that we're organizing. We've shifted a lot of our programming online. So we're doing different artist studio visits that are going to start this week. So with some of the artists who have been featured at the museum, we're doing art workshops. We're doing virtual tours of some of our past exhibits. And we're also launching a community resilience series where we're going to be talking with different folks who are organizing here in the Bay Area in different facets and kind of how they're addressing kind of the impact of COVID-19 on specifically Black communities. So finding different resources and hearing from folks who are really like on the ground doing different important work for our community. So there's a lot of activity going on, and so I'd encourage folks to look into that, to support, to show up, to give in all the ways.
That and you know that's what they need to do. So any final words, any closing words you want to people take away?
I mean, I'm just super grateful that we got to have this conversation. It's just a reminder that like there is so much hope and like vibrancy still, especially in our community, and that we're super lucky to be a part of it and to have these exchanges, to be learning from each other, to be creating. So I would encourage folks to continue doing that as we all stick through this together.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us, and have a great rest of your day.
You too.
Yeah, I'm sure I'll see you online.
I know. Real soon.
Real soon. All right. Take care.
All right. Bye.